Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. So today, I'm finally going to get back to some basic information and talk about what this means for the future of the entertainment that we consume. And I'm finally getting to do this because I've been spending every free moment that I have trying to get my graphic novel, Thomas Valiant, out. It is now at the printers. I'm just waiting for it to come back so I can start shipping it, so I do have some free time. And I started to poke around a few of the normal sites that I go to look for information. And I ran across another job posting from Marvel Comics. And really, when I started to delve deep into this thing, it really shows where the future of entertainment thinks it's going and how this is going to go spectacularly poorly for them. So I've done this kind of thing before, looking at job postings from Marvel Comics and seeing what they mean towards the future of this kind of entertainment. I really say any kind of science fiction and fantasy, or quite honestly at this point, any kind of entertainment that you can think of. So that's what I'm going to do today. So, to give you the basis of where I found this, I was looking through some of the usual suspects that post oddly ridiculous things that are coming out from Marvel, and I found that one of them retweeted a tweet from a woman that was trying to promote this job within Marvel Comics. So I went to her Twitter site, and I found that this was the pinned tweet to her Twitter site. She actually works for Marvel Comics, and she is the main person tasked with putting this job posting out there. And so I read her statement, and then all of the rest of the questions that were asked her after that, because she said, ask me questions if you have any, and all of her answers. Then I went to the original job posting, which is on a Disney website, and I read through that. It's fairly brief. Then I followed all of the hyperlinks that were on that page to any additional information. And this gave me a good basis of what they are looking for within this position and what it really means for the future of their company. So this position is an entry-level position. It is an internship for an assistant editor. And I'm going to put up in the background some of the information that I just described and went through. And by the way, if you want to go and apply for this position, you go right ahead. Tell them RJ sent you. So first off, if you even want to apply for this position, you need to currently be in a BA or BS program within university. That is a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science program. Now, they're not looking for someone who has completed that program, but someone who is currently within that kind of program. So we're talking someone who is 1 to 3 years out of high school. So blue-collar people need not apply. Anyone who is not currently within that kind of university program cannot apply for this job. Now, on the one hand, I can see that they are looking for someone with these job qualifications that has a whole lot of attention to detail, but honestly, that does not need to be someone who's in university. This position is actually oddly similar to my freelance work that I did a while ago. And when I was doing freelance research, for about 10 years, I did freelance legal research. And so I was working with about 30 other people doing the same job for different companies. And our number one job was not to make mistakes because we were dealing with tens of thousands, if not millions of dollars, and that was dependent upon whether or not we got the information correct. So the number one job was not to make mistakes. The number two part of the job was to get the work done on time. So attention to detail was quite specifically top of the list at what I have done previously in my life. And I can tell you, of those 30 people that I was working with, tangentially working with, actually, because I was a freelancer, I was quite definitely in the minority as someone who has actually gone through a university program. Most of the people did not, but they all had great attention to detail. So you really don't need that kind of person for attention to detail. I'm just sticking that in there. Now also, let's bring in a little outside information. The last numbers I saw, which was from last year, about the makeup of the people teaching at universities and colleges, was that roughly in the low end of the scale, 75% of them were people who were politically on the left. At the high end, 95% of them were on the left. So we all know, and I certainly know this from experience, and I'm talking experience from 20 years ago, that yes, the university system skews highly to the left. So again, if you're looking for someone who is within this university system, you are most likely, I'd say, at the low end of the spectrum, looking at someone who is 75% on the left. Also, they said in this little job posting that they will take anyone who is in these programs, but they will give preference to people who are a junior or a senior. That is to say, who have been in the system for 1 to 2 years. They'll take someone who is a freshman, but that's only if that's what they get. So again, preferential treatment given to someone who's in the university system for 1 to 2 years. So again, you're looking at someone who has already started their progress in this university system that skews about 75% at the minimum to the left. Also, they will give preference to people in BA programs. So if you're in a Bachelor of Science program, you might get in, but they're looking really for someone who is in a Bachelor of Arts program. So again, you're skewing a little bit more to the left as you get into these qualifications. Because again, being in the university system, I can let you know that people who are in the arts program skew more to the left than people who are in the science program. And on top of that, although they say they will take anybody of any major, the people who they're really looking for are people who are taking an English major. Again, they will take other people, but you get a leg up if you're an English major. And again, I'll have to say, as someone who spent a lot of time within undergraduate work in a arts or multiple arts programs, the people getting an English major skew even more to the left than most people in the arts program. So I'm saying you're going about 80% to the left here now. And just as a very relevant aside, what in the world would you do with an English major? Well, if you're looking to get a job off of having an English major, you're most probably going to get to work within the publishing industry. And here's the thing. In my attempt to get my novel published, which was about 8 years ago now, I dove headfirst into the world of the publishing industry. And really, I would say the publishing industry is the key point of entry for this heavy progressive, quote-unquote, progressive politics to enter into entertainment. It is almost completely taken over by this progressive system and has been since the 1990s. Quite honestly, first of all, for everybody, at the very least, everybody in a, we'll say, low-level position, everybody from the agents to the people you're going to be dealing with as editors, when you're dealing with people at the actual company where your book is going to be published, about 80 to 90% of them are women. And of those people, they are, again, about 75, 80, maybe even 85% of them skewing heavy leftist political activists. And I say that because when looking specifically at the bios of these people, looking for someone I wanted to deal with, in the bios of all of these kinds of people that work within the publishing industry, they always put down, I am looking for this, that, and the other thing in what I am going to be dealing with. And this, that, and the other thing always includes stuff like, I'm looking for women's fiction or nonfiction. That is to say, something which is tainted by heavy feminist political agenda, or they're looking for marginalized stories of one kind or another. That is to say, they're looking for something which touches on the progressive idea of racial politics. And I'm being completely serious when I say they put these things directly in their bios, saying, this is the only kind of story I want to see cross my desk. And again, this is 80%, I would say, of the people you're going to run into anywhere within the publishing industry right now, and it's been that way for quite some time now. This, by the way, is why you now have a very large, especially within science fiction and fantasy, a very large independent movement for people that are self-publishing. So big that it is starting to vie for control of the readership of science fiction and fantasy. Whereas people within the comics world have only started this in the last couple of years, people who are trying to get their novels published realized this about 10 to 15 years ago. But the point being that if that's what you're going to get in the publishing industry, and you're looking at taking an English major, and you're most likely going to go into the publishing industry, then yes, you're going to skew very heavily to the left. And usually, there's a high probability, I find, I don't know why, but a high probability that people who take these English majors also have some connection to things like women's studies. Perhaps it's because you're looking at having a major in something that you interpret most of the time in that academic setting right now through feeling, and that's the exact same way you interpret things when you study things like women's studies. Although it could also be the reverse. It could be the fact that you have women's studies, and the only way that they can promote their ideas is through a narrative and through a story, and therefore that might attract people to the English department as well. But again, I'm not completely sure on the connection between those two things, except to note that I have seen a connection multiple times between these two things. And again, especially when you look at the publishing industry right now, and you look at these people who in their bios list over and over again, I have a major in English and a minor in women's studies. And what are some of the tangential things that actually follow from those qualifications? Well, if you're not within America, or at the very least North America, you might not know just how expensive it is to get a university or college education within the US. And by the way, you have to be a US citizen, or at the very least an exchange student that has the ability to work within the US in order to get this job. There is no free education, nor should there be, by the way. No free education within the university college system within America. You're paying, and you're paying through the nose. And when I say a lot of money, I mean you could possibly go into debt for the rest of your life to get this education. So a lot of money. So when they put these qualifications on this job, they're looking for people who actually, I would say family-wise at the very least, have a lot of excess money so that they can send their kids to university. Now, you might say that, well, there are some scholarship programs and things like that that people can apply for and go to university, go to college that way. But the thing is that there's other qualifications for this job that I think exclude any of those people. One of the things that you need in order to get this job is your own dedicated workspace. Because this is not a job where you go to New York and actually do this job at the Marvel offices. This is a remote job. And that's important for the future, but it's a remote job. And in this remote job, of course, you need your own computer, but you need your own dedicated workspace so that you can A, complete the job that you're being tasked with, and B, be able to do all of the virtual meetings that you're going to have to do in order to get instructions and communicate with the person that is giving you these instructions. So it is noted that you need your own dedicated workspace. Now, what kind of person who is going to university straight out of high school has their own dedicated workspace? Now, again, I would say if you're someone who is going through university, through college with a scholarship, you don't have your own dedicated workspace. Why? Because you'd be living in the dorms. Unless you're one of those small, minute percentage of people who are still living at home because you can attend a very local university. No, you're living in the dorms. And if you don't know what a dorm room looks like, it's basically a small cell that has enough room for wall number 1 to have 2 bunk beds because you're in there with someone else. You have a roommate. Wall number 2 has your roommate's desk and dresser. Wall number 3 has your desk and dresser. And wall number 4 has the door. Now, you might have a closet. That's about it. That's all you're going to get in this dorm room. Anyways, that's my experience with dorm rooms. Perhaps my experience is not actually relevant anymore because I'm working off of information that's 20 years old, but I really don't think they've changed that much. And by the way, to answer the question that I know someone is going to ask, no, you don't get your own bathroom. There is a bathroom for the floor. So that's the bathroom everybody on the floor uses. And so in this space, which you're sharing with another individual and is just a tiny little room, and your desk is pointing towards their desk and towards the door, this is not a dedicated workspace. That is why the libraries are always jammed full of people trying to study, because you cannot study within the dorm rooms. Maybe every once in a while, you might be able to get a little bit of quiet time there in order to study. But really, with all of the nonsense going on in a dorm room and around in the dorm itself, all of the peculiar sounds and everything else going on within this area, that is not a dedicated workspace. Again, you got people coming and going from your room because you don't have this room by yourself. So what they want is a dedicated workspace. What they want is you to have virtual meetings with them. And I would say this dedicated workspace would need to be your own room. Now, a person going to college, going to university, If they have their own room, that means they either have their own apartment or at the very least they're sharing an apartment with other people and they have their own room in such an apartment. Now, can you get a dorm room like that? Probably now you can get a dorm room like that, but it would be the exact same thing as having your own apartment. The exact same thing, I would say, as an expense. And certainly if you have something like a scholarship, they're not giving that to you. So, on top of the expensive going to university to begin with, you're someone who has to have their own apartment, or at the very least their own dedicated space within this apartment that you share with others. And I know for a fact that in any university town, these apartments are typically fairly expensive, hard to come by. That's why they're so expensive. But again, you're taking all of that expense of going to university to begin with and heaping on top of that the fact that you need this own dedicated space. So no, you're not looking for someone who is beholden to the university with a scholarship or anything of the kind. You're looking for someone whose family has money. And I'm not saying that they actually put these stipulations in order to get people with money. I'm saying that because of these stipulations, that's what you're going to get. And in talking about money, that segues quite well into what we have to talk about next, which is how much you're going to get paid for actually doing this job. Now, first off, something very odd happens with when people ask, how much do I get paid for this job? It does not list on the job posting for Disney how much you're going to get paid for this job. And when the woman who is supposed to be tasked with promoting this is asked directly, how much does this job pay? She quite specifically does not directly answer the question. What she says is, go to Glassdoor and they have a good range of what this will entail. Now, what is Glassdoor? It is a Canadian website which talks about jobs and how to get jobs and write a resume and how much you will get for this or that. So I decided to track this down. I went to Glassdoor and I pumped in the exact term that they are looking for as a job posting. And it said on that website that typically you would get about $41,000 to $49,000 a year. Now, again, that's not a whole lot of money, but this is a remote job. You don't have to live in New York, and you're talking about college students. So it's something. It's a little bit of pocket change. By the way, if you work it out for an average of $45,000 a year, because they said the range was about 41 to 49, so I'm going to take the average of 45,000 and work it out into an hourly rate. It comes out to 21.63 if I remember correctly. So $21.63 per hour, and that is before taxes is taken off. So you're making roughly a little less than $500 a week, because what they're looking for is someone that is going to be working 22 to 24 hours a week. So we're talking someone who's working about 4 hours every work day. So when you look at it that way, that's not a whole lot of money when you're looking at working a half a day's work every weekday. Now, two things off of that. Number one, if you're working 4 hours every workday in order to do this Marvel job, plus you're doing all of the studying that you need to do in order to continue your university, and by the way, you have to have a fairly high GPA score in order to actually get this job. Your grade point average needs to be at least 3.0, so that's fairly high. So you're going to have to keep that up as well in order to keep this job. So if you take this job, you got no free time whatsoever. It's going to be you're either working 4 hours every day or you're studying because you're going to have to keep your GPA up. But here's the other thing that I find quite odd. And this is speculation on my part, but it is grounded in some information. For the other postings on the Disney website, they at the very least give you some range of salary of what you're going to get. And in the previous years where they have offered this kind of internship to people, they have told them quite specifically that this is an unpaid position at Marvel. So if you combine that with the fact that the woman who is tasked with actually answering questions that people have about this job posting specifically does not answer the question when she's asked how much does this job pay, that says to me that, number one, you're not going to get any money for this. If you go through the internship, which is, by the way, summer to winter of 2022, if you go through those 3 seasons of this internship, you're not getting paid anything. But if you move from there into an internship after that, that's in Marvel, after that point, then you will get paid the salary that she is pointing towards. So again, I would say from what I've seen from Marvel and Disney before, you're getting zero for this as compensation for your work. And again, that's on top of the fact that you're going to university, taking classes, and have to have a high GPA, so doing a lot of studying. The other thing it tells me is that Marvel in its previous years, in actually stating that no, you don't get any money for this job, didn't get a whole lot of people applying for this job. And therefore, they have to now hide it that they're not going to give you any money so that they can get people to actually apply for it. And then they'll hit them with that information after they've gone through the 1, 2, or 3 interviews that they have to go through, because people in the comments said, yes, you have to go through multiple interviews in order to get the job. So once the person has gone through all of the work in order to try to get the job, and then they contact them and say, yes, we wish to offer you this job, then they'll finally hit them with the fact that, no, I'm sorry, it doesn't pay unless you've been there for this time, and then continue on. But again, that's just my speculation. As I said, grounded in some information from years past, so I think it's more likely than not that I am correct. So let's move on to a few more of the unofficial things that you need in order to get this job, and see how it continues to skew farther and farther to the left. Now, although it does not say this within the job posting itself, it does have a little article on every job posting over at the right that has a hyperlink to it that says that if you are going to be a new employee of Disney, and it also says a ununionized employee for Disney, so I think the union in Disney actually has some kind of out for this. But if you're going to be a new ununionized employee for Disney in any area, so that would include this, then you will need to have had, within the last year, 3 very specific needles stuck into your arm. And of course, I would say that would probably continue on into the future as well. And although we all know that this is not a hard and fast rule, I would say that the typical person who has not had the 3 shots put in their arm over the last year and wishes to have more put into them in the near future, they are people that are typically on the right. So 2 points off of that. Number 1 being, if you're someone who has the proclivities of I don't want to do this, which again is typically on the right, you're going to be excluded from this job. Number 2 being that this, if you remember, is a remote position. Everything from the interviews to all of the work that you do is done in your own space. You are never physically meeting with anyone at all from Marvel or Disney. But this does not matter, because this little hyperlink and little article is posted right there on the side of this job posting. So that's what you're going to have to do. The other unofficial thing that was written all over this woman's Twitter page, but is not actually on the job posting that is on the Disney website, is that she says, on your cover letter, make sure you talk about the fact that you like comics and what kind of comics that you like. So she's giving the people who have heard about this through social media a little bit of a leg up, because as she describes it within her Twitter feed, this will help you get the job. Now, do you need to have this in order to get the job? No, trust me, no. I've listened to enough Marvel podcasts and heard the people who actually have gone through this process and how many of them never picked up a comic book before they worked for Marvel, or thought that reading Archie comics or Calvin and Hobbes or reading manga was the same thing as reading Marvel comics. So those people certainly do get through. But as indicated by this woman again on her Twitter feed, if you put that in there, that gives you an advantage. And again, if you're looking at what kind of comics that you like, I would say if you say on your cover page that you like manga, and you get another person who says, I like Marvel Comics, they're going to give preference to the person who says, I like Marvel Comics. And I would add, if you're someone who said, I like Marvel Comics, and what kind of Marvel Comics I like are old 80s and 90s comics, that's not going to be given as much weight as someone who says, I like this, this, and this of current Marvel Comics. Now, I say that as someone who, although has a tiny company, have actually gone through the process of hiring people. Yes, you do look at these very subtle little things that you wish to see within your employee in order to determine which one is better than the other. So I would certainly say that the person who says, I like this, this, and this current Marvel comic, then they're going to be given preferential treatment as to whether or not they're going to get the job. But the point is that current Marvel comics are nothing but woke nonsense. So again, you're putting right there and told to put right there on your cover letter of your resume the fact that, yes, I like this woke Marvel nonsense that they're putting out right now. And again, that just says skewing farther and farther and farther to the left. All right, so let's take all of that and look at it as to how it's going to affect the future of Marvel Comics. And really, I would say this is a process you're going to get in any entertainment industry. So whatever entertainment that you're looking to consume in the near future as well. And in order to do that, I will have to tell you about the fact that I've already seen the end product of what is going to happen from this job posting. Why? Because, again, I listen to so many Marvel podcasts, and whenever they need to have a bunch of random people who work at Marvel in order to fill up some airtime, what do? They go and look for these people who have actually been through this process and are now assistant editors for Marvel. So I've heard from, I would say at this point, at least a dozen of these people within podcasts talking about their work experience with Marvel. And I would say to a person, every last one of them is female, and every last one of them skews very heavily towards the left. And I don't mean general liberal, I mean heavy, quote-unquote, progressive, heavy, third-wave, intersectional feminists who is always talking about empowerment and people of color. And on top of that, I'll have to note, and I know some of you are getting sick of this by now, but I'll have to note that this is not far off of the position where Sana Amanat started within Marvel Comics. She actually did this position for 2 years within a different comic company, and then Joe Quesada went to her doorstep and said, come and work for Marvel, and by the way, we want you to change the entire direction of Marvel Comics and our entire audience. That's specifically what he said to her. But the point is that she had 2 years of this experience within another comic company, and within 5 years of being at Marvel, she was the second in command of Marvel Comics. She was the one who dealt with everything besides the artistic that had to do with the running of Marvel Comics. So, number one, when you're looking at the qualifications for this person and seeing how heavily it skews to the left, you need to know that this is the person that is most likely going to be one of the chosen few within Marvel within about 7 to 10 years that's going to have a massive amount of influence on what is going to go on within the entertainment you consume from Marvel Comics. That is to say, if they stay there for that long. Or in other words, this is geared towards being an entry-level position that is used to climb the ladder and become someone who works for Marvel Comics and controls what they produce. Number two, as I said, with those quotes that came directly from the mouth of Sana Amanat, she was tasked with being the person to change the direction of Marvel Comics. But what do we see here? We see here them going in the same direction they're going right now. They want a person right now that is going to be steady as she goes, that is going to be someone who says, I see where Marvel Comics is right now, and that's what we're going to carry on with into the future within the next 5 to 10 years. Again, they have no problem telling their junior level employees that they want to change the direction of what they're doing. But this here is them saying quite specifically, no, we like where we're going and we want you to go in the same direction we're going right now, which includes almost with every title, heavy, progressive, political undertones and overtones. But at the same time as all of that, I think there is something very specific that needs to be looked at, sort of the meta-narrative of what is going on here. And it's the fact that where they're promoting this job and telling people about it is through social media. Now, again, it is posted in some obscure corner of the Disney websites in order for you to see it and in order for it just to be out there publicly. But how they are quite specifically looking for people is through social media. And I think this is an extremely important fact. Because, in effect, this is Disney, really, and Marvel Comics doing their equivalent of, hey, fellow kids, And of course, this is nothing new for Marvel Comics. I think it was the creator of the New Warriors back in the 1990s, so the actual New Warriors. The creator of that team used to go down to the newsstand in front of the Marvel offices and talk to the guy who worked at the newsstand and said, "What are kids actually reading for magazines now? And give me a couple of those." And he would take those magazines back up to his office and go through them and see what kids were actually into at that time, and then try to incorporate that into some of his stories. And so I would say you have the exact same thing going on right here. They're looking for young people, quite specifically young people, again, just into university, which is to say 1 to 3 years out of high school, and they're looking for them to carry their ideas into Marvel Comics. But here's the thing. In the way that they actually do this, they're not going down on the street and talking to some guy and asking him and then doing some research. What they're doing is they're putting limitations again and again on who can actually fill this position, to the extent that they are not only asking for someone who is contained within a very specific bubble, but contained within that bubble as it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Because every one of these conditions that are official or unofficial, that is being put upon this position, they are constricting more and more this tiny little bubble that these people who are going to get this job are actually going to have to be in order for A, them to get the job, and B, for them to do the job. Just the example alone of them looking for someone, quite specifically, who has a degree which is focusing on an English major, and you look at all of the surrounding factors to that, what they're really doing is looking for someone who is within the bubble of understanding linguistically all of the progressive norms that have to be put into expressing a quote-unquote progressive idea within a story. And I quite understand that that is a very shaped way of looking at that particular situation. But as you expand it more and more towards the other qualifications, you see that it is not me and my bias shaping it. It is the bias of the people who are putting all of these conditions upon working in this position at Marvel. So let me take a few other things that I've learned over the last couple of years about Marvel and just add them to the pile. You can't really tell whether it's the chicken or the egg in this situation, but from the actions of Marvel over the last couple of years, you can see that they're going towards, or trying to go towards at the very least, a younger and younger audience. But at the same time, they're looking for people who have a lot of excess money, because the only way that they can keep their profit margins up is to charge more and more for the exact same product that they produced the year before. So this would speak to the fact that for this person that they're looking to fill this job, they're going to have to most probably come from a very wealthy or semi-wealthy place in order to just meet the qualifications to work for this job. And again, you want those kind of people working at this entry-level job because they will bring all of their views into the creation of these comics and then express that exact same thing within the stories of these comics and then attract the exact same kind of people as an audience for these products. But here's the thing. They've done some studies on what makes stupid people stupid people. And one of the things that makes stupid people is the fact that they have no real self-reflection. And quite honestly, that is one of the staples of being on the far left politically. It is always never look internally, never say, I'm going to point the finger at myself and examine myself because that's where the problem lies. If you have a problem, point the finger at someone else because it's always their problem. So this inability to have self-reflection is baked right into the ideology of the far left, quote-unquote, progressive person. And this is one of the qualifications you need to be a stupid person. And how this stupid action actually expresses itself within the lives of the people who are producing our entertainment is the fact that they cannot be self-reflective, and therefore they are self-contained within a bubble, within a silo. They do not know what is actually going on within the larger world around them. And we can see that, again, within this job posting. As we get more and more constricted with all of the things necessary to actually get this job, you'll see that the person needs to be more and more contained within a bubble that is exactly the same as the bubble that the people who work at this company right now are already in. And I will have to add the fact that, again, over the last couple of years, when listening to these podcasts at Marvel, the people who are creating these books, they quite specifically believe that there is a mass audience out there just waiting to eat up all of these products. They just haven't found a way to connect with them yet. So again, they're using these young people to bring them into these positions because they believe the young people are the connection that they need, and their understanding is the connection that they need in order to enter into the situation where they can reach this mass audience. And that idea that these people possess is based upon their ignorance. It's based upon the fundamental fact that they are ignorant of everything around them and believe, because they're in this bubble and can't see outside of it, that everyone else is in this bubble as well. Or at the very least, the majority of people in this world believe and think exactly the same as they do. And if you add a couple of simple things from reality, you will see where this is going. First of all, if you look at this job posting itself, and again, see how it constricts over and over again to the fact that you need to be in this bubble in order to do this job, and the fact that these people will then move up the ladder within this company and be within 5 to 10 years the people who are controlling what is going to be made with this entertainment, then you can see that this is definitely the course that they want to continue on. And at the same time, you'll note, if you know anything about comics or even just entertainment in general these days, there are massive amounts of people who are finally saying, no, I don't want this. This is not what I want out of my entertainment. This is garbage. Give me X, Y, and Z. And they're voting with their wallets and everything else, and they're telling these people, no, 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 don't produce this kind of stuff anymore. And yet, these people who control the entertainment industries are continuing not only to go in this direction, but are planning to go in this direction for, at the very minimum, the next 5 to 10 years. We can see the very fundamental stupidity of these people. And that stupidity is quite simply the fact that no matter what kind of evidence is presented to such people, they are so contained within their own bubble that they will not only continue on this course, but they will go to their deathbeds believing that they are on the right side of history. So, if I've given you anything new to think about, hit the shield in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about all this. All right, I'll leave it there. I'll see you later. Bye.